Hey everyone, my name is Matt Gonzalez and I'm a senior PM here at GitLab for the compliance group. And this is the 13.5 kickoff call for the managed stage. So I'll go ahead and toss it over to Melissa for the access group.
Thanks, Matt. So let me talk about some of the things that we're working on the access team. So I'll share my screen. So one of the, it's been a kind of like a longer running initiative that we've been doing is really revamping the members list for better usability. So I linked to the issue where you can see basically the entire list of issues identified. This has been a joint initiative with the growth team. And there's part of this is that there's several user lists and they're not consistent and just overall they could be improved. And then also we took this opportunity to change that component to be a pajamas component to play into our larger initiative as GitLab to move to pajamas. So there's a lot of work that's been done, but I think it's best summed up with an image. So you can see here, this is our existing list. In case you're not familiar with it, pretty straightforward users list, but there's actually a lot of hidden data elements that are conditional, sometimes appear, sometimes don't appear. And for a lot of them, it's not very clear even what they are. So you can see this is the new functionality, so side by side. One of the biggest changes is that we have a lot more columns, right? So a lot of the elements that were sort of here in this area are now distinct columns. They all have tooltips. We worked on the language for them to try to make it more clear. Of course, that's iterative, and there's some that we will probably continue to work on. So just overall, more clear, and then doing this basically sets us up to be able to do better filtering, right? Since we now have more columns for more data elements. And it's just overall more usable. So the first iteration of this is doing this at the group level. So the group members list is the first one to be changed. And then we'll move on to project list and also the main users list at the instance level. So we expect that the first iteration of this will launch at 13.5. But like I said, it's going to be in multiple phases. The first one is the group level list. Another thing that we're launching is project access tokens. So this was launched GA for self-managed in 13.3. But there were some GitLab.com specific issues that we needed to complete, specifically just around making sure that this feature was secure, right? And there's a couple of things in the backend where we create users and just some considerations for GitLab.com. And to remind you what that looks like, it's like this. So at the project level, you have a section called access tokens, and you can basically create a token that can be used for that project only. So that will launch in 13.5. And then lastly, we have a concept for what we're calling admin approval for user signup. So basically today in self-hosted instances, there's an option to enable what we call open registration. And what that does is that on the sign-in page, you see a link that says register. So people can turn that on or off. But when it's on, basically, when you register, you're now in the instance. You're not added to any groups, but any groups that are public in that instance, you can see them and interact with them. So what this change will do, and there's no visuals because for the first iteration, there's no UI. But basically what it does is that instead, it's a configuration setting so that instead of automatically being part of the instance, you go into a state where you're waiting for approval, right? So an admin will get a notification email that says there's this person waiting to be approved, and they can basically say yes or no. And that user can't access anything, and they're not billable while they're in this interim state. So it's a way to have the convenience of open registration, because a lot of the people use that so that the admin doesn't have to do all the data entry and basically all that tedious part of the process, right? But the user's still, not able to just have access to the instance by clicking register. So yeah, those are the major changes coming from my group.
Cool. Thanks so much for sharing. I'd love if you could spend maybe just like a couple of seconds talking about the pain point behind the project level access tokens, because I thought that was a really interesting problem to solve, and curious if you could expand on that a bit.
Yeah, sure. So basically, especially for large enterprises, creating a user in GitLab is actually a pretty big feat, right? Because if you think about if you're SSO connected, right, you're not only having to create a user in GitLab, but you basically have to take it as far back to the source of truth for users, right? So a lot of times it involves creating a user in your Active Directory, right, which means they get an inbox, right? They basically are this shell entity basically that you have to create all the way back. And not only is it frustrating, right? Because at that point you're interacting with your probably company IT, and that can take a long time. But a lot of times it's also expensive, right? Because there's some costs associated down the line, right? And also with GitLab, where that only for the purposes of accessing things via the API, that person's now a seat, right? Which you never intend that person basically for that account to log in or do anything other than make a few API calls. And also from the security perspective is now you have this token that's basically someone needs to keep it, right? And if it's associated to say Matt, right? We choose his account to do automation with. If Matt leaves my team, right, it's now forever tied to him. So it's basically coming from a few angles that we're trying to solve here. One is cost, right, of not having to procure dummy accounts, right? That's one thing. And the other is basically giving people a way to create access to a project without tying it to an individual.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that added detail. That's great. Nick, Harris, any questions?
Yeah, actually, first of all, I would say kudos for the group for actually looking at the user experience, and those tables with users look great. And I just look forward to other issues, like other lists, projects and other lists, getting the same kind of treatment and getting the consistency and the usefulness. So that's just awesome. I'm just really excited about that. And my question is about the project access token. I wonder, is there any difference between the access token that you get at the project level versus the access token that you can get for the instance in terms of how it's used or what it can see other than it's logged down just to the project? I'm asking because we're looking at using the personal access token for access for migrating parts of your GitLab instance. And I wonder if we should be considering two different types of tokens, or is this just kind of the same as the token that we previously had?
Yeah, so today you can only generate tokens basically in the scope of a user, right? So this kind of removes that user tie, right? This is a token for the project, but we are looking at iterations of basically bringing that up to the group level. That's the next iteration of this, and then past that, we do have requests of basically having a way to generate an instance-wide token.
So if we were to use that personal access token generated at the project level, we would not be able to see the group it belongs to, right?
You could see that because you could do API calls and you could derive what project you belong to, but you can only make operations within that project. You can't do anything at the group level.
Oh, cool. Thanks. I'll make sure that our engineers look into that because we're tinkering with that in 13.5 as far as using the personal access token to migrate groups across from one instance to another.
Yeah,
Thanks.
the one caveat I would say to look into is there's no way to generate a personal access tokens other than through the UI today. We do have also future iterations of being able to systematically produce.
That's fine. Our feature is UI based as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, cool.
And one final thought is I'm excited about the product access tokens, as you and I have talked about, Melissa, but for kind of the audience sake, because it'll just make the credential inventory on GitLab.com, I think, easier to implement, more valuable or valuable at all for GitLab.com customers. So really excited to see all the implications of that work. And then with that, Nick, over to you.
Cool. I'll get started and share my screen if I can find the button. Cool. So in 13.4, within the analytics space, we made a lot of great changes around MR analytics and instance statistics as well. And essentially what we're doing in this milestone is following up and expanding upon those features. I've spoken with a number of customers quite recently, and some of our most valuable customers really rely on the category of DevOps reports to get a better understanding of how they're adopting GitLab, what the sort of return on investment of GitLab is, and it hasn't seen much love recently. So we're basically investing a lot of our effort, I'd say about 75% of our effort, adding more content to this category, specifically around instance statistics. And the rest of our effort is going to be used doing some follow-ups on MR analytics to refine that functionality and make it more useful. So we'll start out with instance statistics, and I'll actually just show the epic because it's all related. But essentially the key pain point here is a lot of our users just generally want to understand how they're trending and how they are using different areas of GitLab's most popular features. So getting just an at a glance view and sort of understanding whether we're trending up and to the right is a pretty useful thing. So we put together this instance statistics dashboard. And this dashboard's relatively simple. We have some of these statistics already within the admin view, but they weren't graphed over time. So we're starting to visualize this stuff a little bit more and make it a little bit better to understand how we're trending. So the proposal is actually adding 4 charts on top of each other. We have these metrics already, and what we'll be doing is adding these charts, one showing the number of users in the instance, 2 showing the number of projects and groups superimposed upon one another, 3 showing issues and merge requests superimposed upon one another, and then third one is pipelines. And pipelines, we're actually going to have 2 other categories as well. One is I've forgotten the other options of pipelines, but there's other stuff there, and it'll be included. So that's sort of where we're investing the effort. Where we'll have this, we'll be started out with users and sort of just working our way down with the charts, and that'll be super useful for some of our users. And then the other area we're working on after shipping MR analytics with a specific focus on throughput to start out with, we have just released this chart and this table, and we've just had the filter bar implemented where you can filter things like branches, authors, assignees, all this sort of stuff. So this table is starting to become super useful for developers, development team leads, getting a good understanding of what's been closed within a certain period of time. And what we'll be focusing on this milestone is adding this date picker here. So you have a more specific slice of time, and also allowing us to paginate the table as well, just making it a little bit easier to manipulate the data, because right now it's just a big old list of 100 or so MRs. So just improving the usability in that way. So those are the key things that we're focusing on within Managed Analytics, and I'll pause there and open up for questions.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the inspiration behind focusing on these a little bit more, because I think one of these views was what my group was trying to use to look at how things are moving out of, I think, the refinement phase, because we use like the next up label and stuff. But I think that was, I can't remember if that was issue analytics or if that was one of these views that you showed, but could you maybe talk about some of the use cases there?
So the use cases around MR analytics, there are a number of them. The key metric that we're focusing on right now is throughput. So that's closed MRs. So there are a number of things we're thinking this could be used for understanding just general productivity, which is the obvious one, seeing what's coming through and having filters so you could sort of understand specifically your team or what a section of your team is working on. Understanding a little bit more about the trend of what is, so we're going to be adding in things like mean time to merge. So understanding if there are any interesting correlations between mean time to merge and some of the metrics within the table, and generally just having a greater understanding of what's been achieved within a certain time frame. So thinking about using this in the context of like retrospectives or also just sprint planning and so on as well.
Cool. And do you know, just out of curiosity, are there groups internally right now that are dog fooding as it exists today and working with you on the improvements in some way?
I hope there are, and I will include the link for the feedback issue as well. But yeah, I've been trying to twist people's arms and get people to use it and provide some feedback. So yeah, you better be using it.
Hey, Nick, I want to sign up to be your lab rat. So whatever charts, views, anything you feel like might be useful to me, please let me know. I would like to start dog fooding it, and I will give you as much feedback as you can take. So, hope the issue can hold a lot of feedback. I've been doing that with some of the other elements of things that I use within GitLab, and I would definitely love to dog food analytics as much as I can. Up until now, I wasn't able to find a lot of areas that were providing value, so I'm willing to just look at what you're working on right now and provide feedback to just get it to the place where we all get a lot of value out of analytics. So please ping me all the time.
Cool. I'll post some stuff in the managed channel, and we can take a look and you can provide some feedback. But that's awesome. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to chime in and say I love the idea of building reports to allow champions to demonstrate value. I think that's really great, right? Because it's helpful for them to see trends like that, but it's also nice for us, right? Because if there's ever a question about adoption or what value are we getting out of this, it's just super easily accessible.
Yeah, totally agree. I think ROI is like a thing that I've heard customers talk about and again. And we're going to start out by just having ROI, like GitLab adoption as a rough proxy for ROI, and then use that as a framework and start building on top of it. But yeah, some of these charts that we're providing are hopefully getting users to understand that adopting GitLab is useful and providing value around cost savings and all that sort of stuff.
Cool. Thank you for that, Nick. So I'll go ahead and jump into the compliance one. Share my screen. So what we're focused on in this release is going to be another iteration on the credential inventory. So a few milestones ago, we took the opportunity to focus on the overall credential management experience at GitLab, trying to balance between the generally disruptive nature of credential management and the hard requirements that our customers have. And I guess also like our general stance of wanting to provide the best developer experience. So one of those iterations is adding a delete button to the admin credential inventory. And the reason we added this and a revoke button for personal access tokens was to give flexibility to admins. So They can optionally enforce programmatically the revocation of a personal access token right now. But one of the pieces of feedback we received was from some customers is, hey, I don't want to be that disruptive. I want to have some say in when that gets revoked, because maybe I want to work with the developer first. Maybe I want to be a bit more lenient. Maybe I want to give a little bit of lag time. And so adding these buttons is a very simple, intuitive way to empower an admin to do that, where they will see that a credential has expired. Maybe they know it's been compromised, or they suspect it's been compromised, and they can go in and just manually address that. So that's what we'll be iterating on in 13.5 in that context. We're also working on a foundational component to bringing this functionality to GitLab.com. Even though we're moving away from group managed accounts, we felt that it was the right decision to at least bake this functionality in to be supported at the group level for the credential inventory, so that when we start incorporating the project scoped access tokens, and I think, Melissa, there was also like group scoped tokens that were coming. So when we start aggregating those credentials into this inventory, we'll then be able to support the revocation of those tokens in much the same way that self-managed admins can do today. We'll also be iterating on the user list. So along the theme of access, where you're trying to add more value and better clarity to these listings, this is part of an epic to eventually export a list of all users and the access they have access to within a namespace. So this iteration just simply tallies the total number of groups and projects in the admin view's user list. The value here is that if I know that Harris and Melissa should only be part of 1 and 3 groups respectively, and I see that Harris is part of 10, I can make a very quick decision about I need to go look into that. We'll then be following that with the ability to export this data with a much more granular breakdown of those 10 groups are groups A, B, C, D, etc. We're also going to be working on the ability to export merge requests to a CSV, similar to how exporting issues works today just for merge requests. This is one of the many exports that our customers want to be able to compile evidence or evidence artifacts themselves outside of GitLab, since we don't currently provide custom tailored or comprehensive audit reports. So these are some of those quicker wins we can provide by allowing them to export the data that already exists within their namespace so that they can then manipulate or parse through that in the way that they need to. And then the final noteworthy one is we're making some UX and UI improvements to the audit events table. We've spent the last several milestones working on some refactoring work for audit events, the underlying model and database table. And now we're incorporating these changes on the front end to provide a better experience and an optimized experience for users, so that we're trying to make it less daunting and less frustrating to have to deal with the slow, arduous viewing or user experience on the audit events table. And then finally, just not in an issue, but or not a single issue, but we have several issues that we're working on to make improvements to things for project deletion, and then some technical debt on the front end that should also have the added benefit of improving the overall UX for some of the areas that we manage or build. But I think that's the key highlights for the compliance group. Any questions or comments?
Just excited for the inventory direction, and hopefully bringing that to GitLab.com soon by making it group level.
Yay for UX.
Yeah, those UX improvements look really good. I could imagine it's gonna have a big impact.
Cool. Well, thanks for the feedback. And if nothing else, we'll go ahead and close out with Harris.
Thanks. So I'm going to be talking about one big MVC that we're going to deliver in 13.5, and that will be the focus of the team, and we'll be swarming around this in order to get this MVC in place so we can then follow up with many iterations to get it to where we need it to be. So that will be the sole focus, and that is the GitLab group migration MVC. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, so I want to talk about the current experience a little bit, sort of to point out the pain points and why we're really doing this. So in today's world, when you want to migrate a group from one instance of GitLab to another instance, whether it's migrating from a self-hosted instance into GitLab.com or maybe going from GitLab.com into a self-hosted experience, self-managed, what needs to happen is coordination of many different exports and imports. So for each one of the groups, in order to get the group imported in the destination, what you have to do is provide a file, which is an export from the originating instance. That file you can get by going to the group settings, general, not the most intuitive place to find these things. And when you want to guess where it is in here, it is in their advanced. We expand that, scroll down, hit export group, which will then kick off a file creation. Once that file is created, you will have to save it somewhere locally and then attempt an upload here. What happens in these, so that file will contain just the group level info. It will not contain any of the subgroups. It will not contain any of the projects and any of the data that hangs off of that. So you'll get the epics, but not the issues, for example. In order for you to migrate the entire group with all the projects that belong to it from one instance to another, you will need to export each project individually and the group overall, and then kind of reassemble that on the back end by importing the group and then importing the projects. This is very complicated and is a, it's definitely not something that many people can self-serve, especially if they have large groups or large projects or a large number of groups and projects. In addition to it not scaling well, it is not resilient. There are no auto retries. There is no partial imports of file. Either the entire file is imported or it's not. These files can get quite large. So we're sometimes talking about gigabytes being uploaded. And there's network issues and all kinds of problems that come with that, that kind of break the ability for people to do this. So in order to overcome that and to make this so that anyone can move their groups and projects from any instance of GitLab to another instance of GitLab, we are going down the path of creating a GitLab entire group migration, which is going to be similar to what we already have for Bitbucket and GitHub. In those cases, we just point at a project in GitHub, and it's kind of an API call. It's a server-to-server communication. You don't have to download anything any intermediate files. You don't have to upload anything. It is one instance talking to another, and the data streams across, which is faster and a lot more reliable. So the first step for us is to add a new way of doing group imports. So in addition to the file-based import, we're now adding the ability to provide a URL for the source instance of GitLab and a personal access token, which ties into what I was asking Melissa about earlier, and authenticate with that other GitLab instance. Once you do that authentication, you will see all the groups that you have access to on that remote instance, and you will be able to select which one of these you want to move across. In the end, the goal is for that to migrate everything that hangs off of that group, including all the projects and all the subgroups and projects that hang off of that. For the MVC, we are selecting only to import one group at a time. And the only data in addition to kind of the group metadata that will be imported that hangs off of that are the epics. So you'll be able to initiate a group migration for the MVC, provide the credentials, see the list, select one group, and that group will then be recreated on the instance, and we will then migrate any epics that hang off of that group. So that will be the MVC. It is a pretty lofty goal, and there are, as you can tell, there are a lot of issues that hang off of that. They're all scheduled for 13.5, so the team is committed to delivering this MVC at the end of 13.5, where we'll be able to do the one-click migration of an entire group with its epics. And from then on, we'll just iterate and start adding more detail until we have a product that people will love to use. So that is the main focus. In addition to that, we'll of course pay attention to bugs, escalations, and security issues, but the main focus for the team for 13.5 is going to the delivery of this MVC. Thoughts, questions?
I reviewed the experience that Amanda created, and it's really nice. It's great bit of UX. I'm wondering that right now it doesn't seem like there's an apparent way or easy way for us to dog food this. But have you got any recommendations for how we could dog food this and provide feedback?
I have not come up with a good scenario where we would internally need to use this. However, I am working with the professional services group that has built a tool called Congregate. And the reason for why that tool was built is because we didn't have this in place. So if we had this in place, we probably wouldn't have built out a tool that all it does is it just kicks off all these exports for groups and all the sub-projects, stores them somewhere, and then kind of tries to re-import those in the right spot and then put the things back together. So that was the original goal for the Congregate. And what we'll be doing is we will hopefully be replacing some of the pieces and some of the logic from Congregate with this new logic. And Congregate will be a lot more lean and not have to know as much about business. So I expect the professional services and the Congregate team to be kind of the team that dog foods this for us internally.
Cool.
I just wanted to say kudos on having like a really small, well-defined MVC. I think you did a really good job of taking what's like a super large thing and scoping it down to one piece, right? And then you can build on top of that. So I thought that was really cool.
Thanks. It was definitely a goal to have a very thin slice, but it actually works end to end. And that will flush out all kinds of different things, from the APIs we want to use to the front end back end connection. I mean, it is huge. Even in the smallest, like the thinnest slice, it is still going to be a huge step forward and kind of lay out the framework. But yeah, you're right. This was kind of the thinnest thing that we could think of that would actually still create value for somebody to click on.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. Well done, Harris, and your whole group. I think that pretty much wraps us up, unless there are any final questions or comments about anything. Cool. And if not, great to see everyone. Thanks for another great kickoff video. I'm excited for what's coming in 13.5. And what's the adage? Is like the best release ever is coming up. So I'm excited for everything, and you all have a great rest of your day. All right, bye y'all.